Hey, what do you say, what do you know, what do you hear, my fellow UK inhabitants of the UK concentration camp. It's probably over-egging it a bit. So, Sunday, 23rd of May, and looking out the window, it's supposed to be summer, and what have we had today? It's cold. It's been raining, it's been blowing a hoolie. So what do you do on a British summer day when you should be out riding your bike on a British Sunday, summer Sunday? If you get really bored and frustrated, you climb into one of these. I just flew a over one hour mission escorting Heinkel 111s to bomb targets in Russia. Didn't meet a single enemy airplane, so that was pretty shit. Anyway, the subject of this video, which I'm making because I'm bored, so I'm entertaining myself and hopefully entertaining you as well. The BMW S1000R cam chain issue. Is it actually an issue? So I've had quite a few bikes over the years, and I have to say that once I got used to riding my current S1000R, I did start to notice the noises from the engine. So I immediately googled that shit, as you do, and discovered that the bike's known for having a noisy engine. Everyone talked about it, loads of forum posts, I mean shitloads. Worries and concerns and complaints, and even somebody saying, yeah, BMW fucked up the design because they relied on their computers too much and didn't have a human check certain parameters. And in the case of the cam chain, apparently, according to this guy, is that the cam chain is slightly on the insubstantial side of size. It's not quite beefy enough for the job. So that was his opinion. I don't know what kind of an expert he is, but that's what he reckons. It's too thin. It's not strong enough, so it stretches prematurely apparently. So the engine's noisy, and apparently that's because the cam chain is already noisy by design to start with, but because it's not strong enough or thick enough, heavy enough, it stretches rather sooner than others of other bikes, and then it starts to flap about. So that makes sense. And it is a common issue that it's a very noisy cam chain, and it can be anything from just a bit of a rustle, which you can hear, to a hell of a rattle, which is when you should start to feel concerned about it. One of the solutions that was proposed and many people have taken up is fitting one of these. This is a manual cam chain tensioner. So the OEM tensioner is an automatic one, and it's operated by hydraulic oil pressure. So when you start the engine, the oil starts pumping around, and on the OEM one, the automatic one, this plunger here gets pushed out into the cam chain by hydraulic pressure. So the oil gets pumped inside it through a little hole in the side. The oil gets pumped in when the engine's running, oil pressure, which pushes that plunger out, and behind that plunger there's a spring. So as the tension releases, the spring is supposed to hold the plunger out a certain distance. When the engine's turned on, the oil pressure pushes it out even more. I guess as the chain flexes under load, it can push that plunger backwards and forwards. So the oil pressure drops as you reduce the revs, but the spring stops it from snapping all the way back in and completely letting the cam chain come off of any tension at all. So it's a kind of an automatic two-way tension device. It's spring loaded that way and it's oil pressured that way. This manual one, you screw it in with the bolt so that that plunger goes to a fixed position and holds the cam chain under a fixed tension regardless of how fast the engine's running. High revs, low revs, that tensioner will always be in exactly the same position. So I've bought this and I fitted it and I jiggled it about, which allowed me to learn to understand that in fact my cam chain wasn't that noisy. I heard it all the way from zero tension, where it rattled like a machine gun, to where it was too much tension and it made a whirring sound. So when I found the sweet spot, I realised that the noise the cam chain was making then was no different to what it was making when the automatic tensioner was in. So I put the automatic one back in, because I figured variable tension is better than fixed tension. So when I got my bike, it had 13,000 miles on it, and the cam chain noise was okay, as I discovered by fucking around with this. 17,000 miles, I noticed that the cam chain had become a lot noisier. So I was like, right, something needs to be done. Didn't like it. Don't like it a bit noisy, flapping about. To my mind, it was doing some sort of damage. It may be very, very gradual, but over a period of time it's going to break something. So I thought about putting the manual one back in, but then I discovered that you can swap the cap. Now that cap is kind of like, goes there. That cap holds the tensioner in the engine block. Well, you can swap this cap for one that's longer, and what it does is it pushes the tensioner in that much further, and you're only supposed to fit the different one, the longer one, which is silver coloured, once your bike's done a minimum of 15,000 kilometres. So I ordered the silver one, fitted it, and sure enough the cam chain noise went away. So definitely the cam chain had stretched, and by putting the longer cap on, it pushed the tensioner further against the chain and took up the slack that had been caused by the chain stretching. Obviously the chain is going to stretch more, so at 17,000 miles, it's nearly 18,000 now, you start thinking to yourself, how long is that chain going to last before it stretches to the point where it's slapping about inside the engine and breaks something, or the chain itself snaps? Is that likely to happen? Coffee. So, a few more forum posts reading up on this length of the engine, the longevity of the engine. So I read a bunch of posts where people are going, my S1000R is now over 60,000 miles and it's still running sweet as a nut. So then you think, well, given that the cam chain is known to stretch to the point that it starts to rattle significantly on bikes that have done around 20,000 miles and have had the silver cap, the longer cap put on, what's that saying? How are people's bikes getting to 60,000 miles without any kind of a catastrophic breakdown? Well, then common sense kicks in. So the bike's rev limit is 11,000 RPM, and I think an automatic assumption of a lot of people is that if the bike's top RPM limit is 11,000, that must mean that you can ride it around 11,000 RPM all day long, 24/7, and the engine will never suffer for it. Common sense, on the other hand, dictates that if two people buy exactly the same bike and they both ride the bike exactly the same amount of miles each week, but one of them never exceeds, say, 7,000 RPM, and the other one hits 11,000 RPM every single chance he gets. So he starts his bike off in first gear, 11,000 RPM, changes to second, 11,000 RPM, changes to third, and so on, and he does that every single time he rides the bike, every single time he changes gear. Could we rationally believe that after 3 years both those engines would be performing just as well as each other? That the guy that never exceeds 7,000 RPM would have his bike running fine, and the guy that's doing it to 11,000 RPM every single chance he gets, that his engine would be running just as well. My common sense belief is that the guy that's doing 11,000 RPM, his engine wouldn't have lasted 3 years doing 500 miles a week. His engine would have broken. So, given all of that, I'm having my bike, it's going in for its 18,000 mile service, which is typically when you have your valves checked to see if any of the shims are out. So I've decided when it goes in at 18,000 miles to have the cam chain replaced. And I don't abuse my bike. I don't rev it to 11,000. I don't think I've even had it up to 11,000 RPM once. I'm pretty sure I've hit 10. I think I've seen that on the rev counter, 10,000 RPM. But typically I don't exceed 7,000 RPM. There's no need to. I'm not on a racetrack. There's just no point doing that to the engine. It's called mechanical sympathy, I believe. So yeah, I fitted the silver cap. That's taken away the noise, and at the moment it's still not making a rattly noise, so I guess the chain's okay. But I don't know what the guy that owned it before me did with it. It had 3 owners before me. I've no idea how any of those guys rode the bike. I don't know if they ragged it, thrashed it to 11,000 RPM. I don't know what state the plastic guides on the chain are in. That's what the tensioner pushes a plastic guide, and inside that guide, that's where the chain's running. So those plastic guides can suffer damage. I have no idea what state they're in. When they change the cam chain, those plastic guides will be changed as well, and the sprockets, the little cam shaft sprockets. That comes as a kit, and they change the whole lot. So I figure, for the cost, the extra cost of having that done while it's having its valves checked, and funnily enough, the guy at Barnstorm has told me that when they figure the price for doing the cam chain, the price is figured on the basis that the valves are being done anyway. Which is kind of a bit of a coincidental thing. I don't know, it's a bit odd, but it reduces the price of having the cam chain done. The cam chain's 90 quid. The kit, I believe, is 90 quid, and there's a bit of labour involved. So the cost of doing the cam chain is £360 all in. And if it wasn't having the valves done at the same time, I believe that cost would be higher. So it is what it is, guys. If you're worried about your cam chain, I would suggest that you only need to be worried if you're ragging your motor. If you're regularly hitting 11,000 RPM and like caning it all the time, that's when I'd suggest you have a reason to worry and may want to think about changing your cam chain. A lot of people joked about it being a consumable item, and they're not supposed to be. The cam chain is supposed to last the life of the engine on a good machine, and a lot of guys were saying, no, not with this, not with the S1000R, it's a consumable. It needs to be changed pretty much along the same kind of lines that you change your drive chain. And my feeling is that if you're ragging the fuck out your engine, then that's probably true. You probably do need to change your cam chain at some point. Who knows when. If you fitted the silver plug, or you fitted a manual tensioner and you've already extended it as far as it can be extended, and now you're hearing your cam chain rattle, my suggestion would be get the cam chain renewed, put a new one in. If you've got the silver cap or a manual tensioner and your cam chain is not rattling, then you're probably okay. But it's something to bear in mind. Anyway, hope it's been informative and hopefully entertaining as well. Thank you for watching and listening, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!